In 2018, EDS, Electronic Data Systems, sold their infrastructure applications and business process business to Hewlett Packard for $15.5 billion. In 2019, Tableau sold their data visualization business to Salesforce for over $15.5 billion. However, business exits do not always go to plan. Are you a leader in a business looking for an exit? Are you looking for a profitable sale of your business? Are you looking to exit your business on your terms? What if you could stack the odds of a successful exit in your favor? This video is the third in a 4-part series on leading through an acquisition. If you've not yet watched the first 2 parts, it will be a good idea to check those out as well. In this video, we'll look at the seller's perspective of what goes on during an acquisition from the exploration phase up till transaction close. Let's go. Let's get started. The buyer and seller will interact and negotiate throughout an acquisition process. The seller's perspective of reality is different from the buyer's perspective of reality. This is the case not just because they are different organizations, but they also have different objectives from the acquisition process. This interaction goes on to varying degrees during exploration, heads of terms, due diligence, and transaction close. The exploration phase from a seller's perspective. The exploration phase from a seller's perspective is driven by an inward-looking perspective, a perspective that motivates the seller organization to look inward at the time, effort, and money invested into their own organization. An inward-looking perspective that says, my team and I have worked hard for this organization and deserve to be rewarded. An inward-looking perspective that naturally puts a lot of value on the prospective business being sold. During the exploration phase, leaders in the seller organization will ask questions like, what are all the things within our organization we can showcase to make sure we get the most value from an acquisition? What negative things do we need to get rid of within our organization before we sell? What within our organization do we need to hide from the seller to make sure we get a high valuation of our organization? What do we plan to do after we exit the organization, and how can we get the most from the sale so we can do what we plan to do? The inward-looking perspective is great when it comes to focusing on the details of an organization. The inward-looking perspective helps leaders optimize their organizations before a sale. The inward-looking perspective during the exploration phase could leave seller organizations vulnerable to missing industry-wide macro trends. The heads of terms phase from a seller's perspective. During the heads of terms phase, the buyer and seller organization reach a legally non-binding agreement in principle to the transaction. The seller's inward-looking perspective from the exploration phase persists on to the heads of terms phase. During the heads of terms phase, leaders in the seller organization ask inward-looking questions like, are we, the sellers, being compensated enough for the work we have put into the organization? How soon will the transaction close so we, the sellers, can focus on something else outside the organization? How can we, the sellers, extract ourselves from the day-to-day running of the organization? How soon do we, the sellers, get paid? The inward-looking perspective is very good at making the seller organization demand a high valuation for their organization. The inward-looking perspective helps assert the seller's needs to the buyer. A risk to watch out for is the inward-looking perspective could leave the seller organization blind to negotiating tactics that give the seller more leverage over the buyer organization. The due diligence phase from a seller's perspective. The inward-looking perspective that has characterized the behavior of the seller organization could escalate during the due diligence phase. During the due diligence phase, the seller organization typically answers investigative-style questions from the buyer. The inward-looking perspective, combined with a loss aversion motive by the seller, motivates the seller organization to respond as quickly as practically possible to due diligence queries. During the due diligence queries, the leaders from the seller organization ask specific and directed questions. These questions include: how quickly can we provide the requested due diligence information? Do we have accurate records to provide the requested due diligence information? Are we following the guidance of lawyers, accountants, and advisors when providing due diligence information? Will any compromising information be revealed during due diligence? Once again, the inward-looking perspective helps leaders in a seller organization focus on providing the information needed during due diligence. It is a good idea for leaders in the seller organization to take a step back during due diligence and ask themselves why the buyer is asking specific questions. Taking a broader view could reveal important clues that will help the seller with negotiations. Negotiation from a seller's perspective. Negotiation is very important in any acquisition and is always taking place. Agreeing to a valuation requires negotiation. Agreeing to a target timeline to complete the transaction requires negotiation. Agreeing to retain key members of staff after the transaction closes requires negotiation. Even agreeing to a location to meet and discuss the terms of an acquisition requires negotiation. Being able to negotiate effectively increases the odds of a successful transaction. There are two forces behind the negotiation. Logic. The force of logic is the force that most readily comes to mind when people think of negotiation. Logic drives sellers to be rational actors and make rational decisions. The force of logic asks questions like: how can I maximize the value of the organization before a sale? How soon can we complete this sale? How much can we get from this sale? What will the successful sale of this organization do for my reputation? The other force that drives negotiation is often overlooked. The other force that drives negotiation is not rational, it is emotion. As people, we're never completely rational in our actions. We're always driven by emotion. This is particularly true for leaders in a seller organization. A leader in a seller organization may have invested years, sometimes decades, in the organization. The sale of the organization is not just a logical financial transaction, but also an emotional journey. The rational emotional force has its own set of questions for leaders. Questions like: do I like the leader of the buying organization? Does the buying organization reflect my values? Is it too easy for the buying organization to make this acquisition? How do I feel about leaving the business I have worked so hard to build? It is easy to think, surely irrational emotional questions have no place driving an acquisition. Reality states otherwise. Particularly for sellers, beliefs and biases can drive the sale process, sometimes in a direction that does not make financial sense. There you have it, a quick look at the questions being asked by the seller of an organization from the exploration phase up till deal closure. We have seen that there are rational questions being asked. There is also an irrational force that influences the outcome of a sale. Would you like to know more about a specific area covered in this video? Please leave your suggestions in the comments below. Also, if you are an expert in the business acquisition process and think I have missed something from this overview, please leave your suggestions in the comments as well. If this video was of value to you, please like and subscribe. In the next video in this series, we'll look at the transaction close. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon in another video.
Are you ready to take change leadership to the next level? Register for our online course, Leading Complex Change. The Leading Complex Change course provides leaders with the insight needed to get things done in a rapidly changing and complex world.